My name is Richard Harris from the Harris Consulting Group. I've been asked by my good friend Steve Richard to help moderate this panel. And I don't know really why, because I'm not, very robotic, right? I'm still a little old school, but that's okay. I want to introduce the people who are in charge of this conversation, though. One is Chad Burmeister, the founder and CEO of Scale X. We also have Jill Guardia, and Jill, if it's Guardia, please correct me.
Right.
Happy to do that. And we have Gary, who is the executive director of sales enablement at TriNet. So I think she's going to bring a great perspective from a large company point of view. We have Gary Millwit, the executive director of learning and organizational development at JG Wentworth. And we have Elon Kassan, the CEO and co-founder of Exceed.ai. So thank you everybody for coming on board. We're excited to have this conversation.
It's great to be here.
Great to be here. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much,
So,
Richard.
yeah, so, I think the first thing we were talking about as we set up this conversation is where are we presently with AI in sales? Are we there yet? Will we ever be there yet? And so I know each of you sort of had some opinions on those kinds of things, but Jill, would love to sort of hear what your thoughts were.
Yeah, sure. So I think AI in sales is well, for many companies, I'm sure is much farther along, but some companies are still sticking their toe in the water around it. It's something that we think would be nice to have robots doing the automation of administrative tasks, data collection, data gathering, but really kind of at a low level is probably where you would see most people sort of starting to try it out, maybe with dialer tools or data scrubbing tools. Those are the types of things that I think almost are no-brainers.
Part where I always use technical issues, right? Got to hit the unmute button. So Chad, when we were talking about this, and you've spent a lot of time in this space, at least in my opinion, given the .ai in your company name, but where are your thoughts on where we are with sales and what we should be looking at as we examine AI?
Yeah, it's interesting. We worked with a company that pivoted their entire business from selling apparel at the start of coronavirus to selling masks, and launched a campaign with them to drop 1,200 voicemails, send out emails, and do social outreach. They sold over $10 million in 6 to 8 weeks. Just before this call, I got a text and it said, I just found out from one of my colleagues that ZoomInfo has this people who search for the term face masks. Why didn't you tell me about it? Literally just before this call. And so we, she used a lot of AI to get outreach done at scale to sell $10 million. And now, because they've experienced that, they're looking at it going, hey, wait, it's your job to tell me where the AI is headed and what it could help us do. So yeah, we wrote the book called AI for Sales, and there's 21 different aspects and areas of where AI is being deployed, right? Lead and list building, pricing configuration, sales assessments like objective management group and those kind of things, conversation intelligence like exec vision. And man, it's everywhere. And yet I think people don't actually realize they're using it because it's kind of because AI can be looked at as a bad word and, oh, is this going to impact my job in a negative way? The train's left the station. I think it's up to us as sales leaders and executives to say, how are peers leveraging AI and how can I leverage it to sell more business?
Yeah, what I also sort of interpreted from what you were saying is, of these 21 different layers, I don't know if we have a slide on that, but you really have to sort of decide what part of the funnel you're talking about, right? There's prospecting type AI stuff, right? There's the actual selling motion AI types of things. There's customer success. There's probably sales engineering AI. There's marketing AI. So I think it's so overwhelming right now that people don't even know where to begin to understand, right?
Yeah, John, if you want to go to the next slide, I think that's
Yeah.
that's the next one. Oh, there's a video. So go forward one more, and then we'll come back to the video, to slide 6 there. The joys of virtual meetings with
Yeah.
20 different windows open, right? Go 2 more. This one. Yeah, there you go. So there's the 21 buckets, right? And it can get confusing. Am I focused on skills development, presentation, lead and list building, et cetera, et cetera? So many different areas. But if, like we talked about, if you distill it down and go one more build, are you looking at a prospecting motion, a selling motion, or customer success? Click one more forward. There you go. Up.
Go back, and then we're not there yet on that one.
Yeah, there we go.
So Eli, I want, I'd love for you to chime in on this, and then of course Gary as well.
All right. So where I feel we are today, so as Chad said, there's many areas where you can apply AI. What I can talk about a lot is about automating manual repetitive tasks. Now, the traditional way of automating was RPA, which is robotic process automation, which you used to take a certain process which repeats itself and exactly the same, and you can automate it. But what we're starting to see now is that there is AI-based automation, where the type of tasks that you can do with AI are more complex type of tasks, which require some decision making and require some deciphering of information. Where we sit in sales and marketing is, if you look at what salespeople or marketing doing while they engage leads, things like follow-up, qualification, scheduling meetings, smart nurturing with two-way email communication, a lot of those type of communications are repetitive. And a big portion of them can be automated, but the reality is that it cannot be automated 100%. And I always like saying that the robots are coming not to replace people, but to help people. So moving forward, you're going to see more and more humans, salespeople, marketing teams, working alongside AI. So the AI will automate the manual repetitive stuff so they can focus on the strategic type of communications. But I don't think we're anywhere close to replacing humans or or handing over the workloads completely to robots.
Hopefully not too soon. Gary, what do you think? Can't unmute him.
Gary, mute.
As muted, I'm
There
sorry.
you go.
So good, because I can retake what I just said. I agree with everything that was just said. We'll take it one step further. AI helps us right now. It helps scale us. We use it for coaching. We use it in our platform, our learning platform. We have people answer assessments. So coaching activities where they tell us how fast words are going, what grade level people are speaking at, how many filler words they use. And we use it before we go and mentor or give feedback. So if it doesn't pass the kind of the machine learning AI, it doesn't get to us as coaches. So it's the first line of defense for us in that way. Same in which we use hiring assessments. And we use them where the minimum score to assess who's coming in for interviews, because we're hiring 250 new sales reps next year. So how do you get through all that? You got to have some kind of technology, some kind of AI to tell us what we're looking for. So the humans are telling the computers, this is what we're looking for. This is the type of person we need. This is the intelligence set we want. And we're getting that. And we're just starting to use it. And then finally, just why we're here. Conversation intelligence matters. Voice analytics matter. What are people saying? Not just how fast they're saying it. What are they saying? Are they saying it at the right time? Especially if you're in a regulatory business like we are. So you need to know that. It's not compliance. It's actually, what are we saying? So that's why I see it right now. It can only get better, and it doesn't take the human out. It actually gives the human more time to do what they're good at.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's going to enhance. I think what's going to change more than the AI is that the salesperson's going to have to up their game, right? We have to be a lot more technical. I'm old enough to remember that, the two tools I had was email and phone. Like that was it, right? And even before email, right? It was just the phone. So you have to keep upping your ante as a human. And, I always sort of say that, success is not going to lower its standards to us. We have to raise our standards to be successful. And this is a big piece of that. By the way, I do want to encourage people, if you've got a question or you want to go into the chat, please go in and do so. We'll be sure to bring in the live questions throughout as well as at the end. So feel free to go post a question. In the meantime, even go into the chat and just tell us where you're dialing in from. So it's always kind of fun to see where in the world people are. I'm going to go to the next question, and we're going to start backwards. This time we're going to go with Gary first. But, I think the question is, where did it go? What are the challenges we're seeing now as it relates to the AI? I think we've touched on it a little bit, but I think there's a lot more to it than just the where are we in the process? What are the challenges of bringing in the AI? Gary, I'll give you a chance to go first on that.
The challenges are exactly what we see behind that screen, all the different options that there are. There's a huge amount of people that are out there touting, whatever it is that they're doing, all of which is probably awesome. I look at it and I go, that's overwhelming just out of the gates. I need AI just to decide who to call to find out. We need better and more information. We need to know what's what. This background slide helps, but the issue for me is we're working all day and we don't have time to look at and see what's available. And then we have to see what's available. And then we got to go talk to the rest of the senior team and get everybody on board. So we got to look for it, find it, and then we've got to be able to sell it ourselves internally before we even get anywhere. So I find it to be, we've got to get to a place where it's less overwhelming, I guess would be the best way to describe it.
How about you, Elon? What do you think?
So from our experiences, the number one fear is that the robots are coming to replace us. Everybody thinks, yeah, it's step one of, somebody taking, moving my cheese. I think the other area we see people a little bit wary is just trust. I don't believe AI can do that. There's no way they can do better than humans. The truth is that the robots are not coming to replace, they're coming to help. And the truth is that they cannot do the job as good. There are some things that they do better than humans and some things that they don't do as good as humans.
Chad, go for it.
Yeah. The biggest, same thing that Elon just said. If I'm talking to a SDR, BDR manager, they're going to say, whoa, stay away. I don't want to have anything to do with what it is you're talking about. If I'm talking to a CRO, and let's say in these crazy times, they just had a 30 to 50% reduction in staff and their quota didn't change. And so they come with open arms and say, man, I've seen some of these videos that are out online. What would you recommend? And so in a 15-minute conversation, depending if you're doing ABM, high velocity, there's so many different paths to market, and there's a different AI fit for different paths to market. So I think the biggest challenge, is a frontline manager, frontline seller that can't see the forest through the trees. You really have to come up above it and say, what am I trying to optimize for? I'm trying to optimize for top line revenue and costs. I want to sell more with less. And that seems to be what's resonating in the world today. And, I think the change management is one of the hardest things to overcome because people are used to doing things in a certain way.
So Joe, we're going to put you on the spot because you're with a big company, right? You're, thousands of employees, big company. You also deal with a lot of sensitive data, right? So what are you guys seeing in with what you're comfortable sharing about your organization? Because I think you're in the middle of it in a very different way than a lot of us in some ways.
Yeah, I think we already touched upon it a little bit. It's, sales is a relationship business. And so, reps are not really inclined to say, hey, look at that robot over there. Let me let that robot do my job for me. So I think it's about really maybe defining when we talk about robots and we talk about artificial intelligence. And Chad had a picture while we were waiting, and maybe that's kind of the picture to show of all of these robots at computers doing the rep's job. And ultimately, back to even what Elon said, it's about finding the efficiencies, finding ways to help the rep be better at their job. So even in a bigger company where we have, a large sales organization, we make technology investments, and some of those technologies have some AI built into them. And we learn how to use that, and we learn how to use that to improve our operating efficiency. That ultimately, that's what we're looking for. And the reps who struggle with that, they rely on their old ways, and if that gets them to the success point that they're looking for, then so be it, right? If that can do it for them. But I think that a lot of reps don't know even where the artificial intelligence is. We use LinkedIn, Zoom Info, HVS, all these tools that have a little bit or a lot of artificial intelligence in them, but the rep's not sitting there going, wow, look, I used artificial intelligence today. They're just looking for, how did I get that list of prospects really cleaned and good data so that when I make my outreach, I'm getting to people as quickly as possible. So I think, kind of the challenge is don't make it bigger than it is. Don't put pictures of robots at their seats and think, well, that's replacing you. Just to help them understand that the investments we're making in technology is to help them be more efficient and more effective at their job.
Yeah, a few years ago, literally, I had a conversation with Steve Richards, and he helped me sort of write a post that, most companies want to be better, faster, and cheaper, but they're only willing to do two of those three things, right? And in most cases, it's all about cheaper. They think that they're doing all three, but they're not. And it's funny. I've had a couple of conversations, and they're like, Richard, how do I get my CEO to even understand we need Zoom Info, right? And my latest is say, go on eBay, find a fax machine, and send it to them, and just put the hashtag blame Richard Harris, and say, hey, we're going to stop using our electronic signature because we think this is better. Think this is, and you kind of have to some of it's a fear from the leadership to spend any money. And I'm even talking pre-COVID. It wasn't even COVID, that's a convenient excuse right now. But if you aren't adapting to Chad's point, you're going to get left behind. So feel free, throw me under the bus if you're worried about it. This is a good question coming from Jonathan. How much damage has been done to the term AI? How much of the damage done to the term AI affects how you implement, train, and encourage embracing and helping technologies, right? Do we think that the word's too overreaching? Are we not, we're just sort of throwing it up. This is fantastic. I'll let anybody jump in. Go for it.
Well, I'll give a stab at it. You can see from this conversation that when we talk about AI, we talk some think automation, some think data analysis, and the way we deal with it when we talk about what we do, we actually don't mention AI. We try and avoid it. We try and talk about what problem we are solving for our customers. And if the customer is curious to understand how we solve it, we will talk a little bit about AI. So we try to focus on the value proposition and how it works and what it does. Because as soon as we talk about AI, we feel that sometimes it can take the conversation to the wrong place.
Yeah, I would parlay on that. Think of Alexa. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Siri. We've worked with several dozen companies who sell a variation of AI, whether it's for a chat bot, whether it's for anything. It could be a technology that just helps people with their shopping cart and optimize that. And what they all go through is they first start with, hey, we're selling AI. It's cool. Check out the features and capabilities. And 99% of the time they pivot to, oh, the name of the AI is Q. Let's focus on Q. What can Q help me do? What can Alexa help me do? So I think that's right. Good question from the audience there. AI is becoming a 4-letter word, and it's just 2 letters.
I can chime in on that too, because the way I have to work, the way I've learned how to do things internally, you have to find the internal pain points and guide people to solutions where if you tell me what the biggest problems you have are, and let's figure out what technologies we can use to make it easier for you instead of more people. Let's figure out what technologies there are, and then you kind of feed that kind of brain to go, well, what about this or this or this? It all leads to the same place. It's the same thing as your sales manager saying, make more phone calls. The veteran rep says, I don't want to make more phone calls, like my quality matters. Well, if you don't have enough quality, then you got to make more phone calls. But if you have the conversation of what matters most to that rep, it'll all lead to the right place. You have to get them involved early, and you have to get the terminologies. If you think AI is a 4-letter word, just use the word technology instead of humans. There's certain things that we can do, as mentioned earlier. You can do things that are rote. You can do things that require a lot of time, and artificial intelligence can help us get that done. And if they choose with us, then we don't force upon them.
Yeah, I don't think the rep is ever going to go to their manager or to the sales ops or sales enablement and say, hey, give me some AI. I'm feeling like I need some AI this week. It's exactly what Gary said. It's about solving a particular pain point. I mean, in the end of the day, these are salespeople. That's what they do for a living, is they try and solve customer pain. That's what they're looking to us to do if we're in that sales support type of role. But they're not going to ask for it by name like, I need AI. They're going to say, I'm spending way too much time on X or Y. Can you help me reduce the amount of time I need to spend on that so I can spend more time selling? Ultimately, that's what they're looking for.
I also think that the reps, the line people, even the managers, line managers, need to know how to ask for it, right? You can't kind of go in and say, hey, I want this tool, right? You kind of have to say, this is my challenge, to your point, Joe, and here are 2 tools that I think will help us, and they'll help us buy this much, and it will then increase revenue. Part of it is teaching the reps how to ask for it in this holistic, bigger picture point of view, which, at least the one I grew up, wasn't that, was STFU, get back on the phone, go plug into your fax machine, right? Gary, I'm gonna ask you a question, completely unscripted. Before we jumped on, you talked about, you're a football coach, right? Just out of curiosity, do you know what kind of AI football teams are using? I mean, obviously we're kickoffs tomorrow night. Anything that people could sort of grasp their hands around of, like, yeah, we used to do it this way, and here's something else.
Everything about their film work is AI. Everything about film work. So they have cameras now that are spotting players individually. In the NBA, every single player, every single referee's got a camera on them the whole time, and they're predicting where to be. I'm going to go to basketball because it's recently studied. The officials are calling more technical fouls and less fouls on this quote unquote superstar players based on AI, based on the fact that they can actually see where they've made their mistakes, based on the technology that's available to know they're in the wrong spot or the right spot. And instead of not calling walking or calling a foul that wasn't a foul like you used to see in the NBA, no, they're calling it like exactly how you see it. And then when you don't like it, when the superstar doesn't like it, they call the technical foul. And that's a perfect way to use intelligence. It's the same way we use call intelligence. But anything that has to do with film work and evaluating players is all about artificial intelligence.
Do you know if they're using it at places like the combine, like, for the NFL, where the NFL players go to sort of run their test patterns and stuff? Are they like, okay, based on this, and here's the historical data, we think this player should produce X, Y, or Z?
Well, that's Moneyball, right? So that's what they're doing, right? They're absolutely figuring out what to do, what stats, what the data shows, and then they're picking players based on some things that are unconventional, so to speak, and it pays off. You're never going to take the human out because the human has to look with his or her own eyes and hear with her own ears. But yeah, they use it. I don't know exactly what the technology is, but I do know the film technology is Huddle, and then they have a competitor. But Huddle is something, it comes on your phone. You can filter your film just for you. You can filter your film just for the player. And out of a whole game, you can filter it just by shots or goals or however you want to do that. So I don't know what they use at combines, but I'm absolutely certain that they're using something, if not a lot of things.
Well, we've talked about the current state. We've talked about some of the fears that are associated with it. Where do we think it's going, right? Aside from, you're going to get run over by it if you don't pay attention. And again, I'll let everybody just sort of jump in on their own on this one.
I could take the first pass there. Dr. Joel Laban actually wrote the foreword to the book and the conclusion. And the statement that sticks with me the loudest is, in sales, time kills deals, right? We know that. In modern sales, AI kills time. So it can, you can do more research faster. It accelerates the number of touches you can do. It accelerates the quality of touches you can do, the timing of those touches, what's said, how it's said, what's the tone of voice. So fast forward in just a couple of years, everybody's got the Iron Man suit on, right? That's why we went from robots in the background, which was the entry to ScaleX.ai, to more of you're wearing the Iron Man suit. And the intent is, hey, get ready to put this thing on, because imagine if I knew that Elon was a certain personality type and the email automatically was filtered to send Elon a very different message than Richard, right? Some people want bulletized text. Some people prefer a big, long train of thought. Some people want a podcast link. Others want something visual. So imagine being equipped with the most intelligent thing in the universe. Believe me, presidents of countries and there are politicians, everybody uses this stuff to make complex decisions. And I think it's going to be pushed to sellers and managers and leaders so that we're powered by not just a guess, right? Oh, I think I'm going to do this email today, but by, if you send this email, this is going to be the reply rate, the open rate, and the click-through rate and meeting booked rate. So it just gets a lot more intelligent, and it happens really, really fast.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chad, and I believe we are moving into an augmented workforce where you're going to have everybody is going to have an intelligent personal assistant, whether you're in sales, marketing, and any other function. And I like thinking of it that smart humans are going to be using intelligent assistants to be successful. And those who will not adopt this type of technology will just stay behind, both on an individual level and also on a company level.
Let me just give you one example. The middle image there. Some of my best sellers at Ring Central on the BDR outbound side would go out and they'd say, here's my list of top 100 targets. And then they'd, instead of emailing and calling and doing direct sales to them, because that converts at a very low rate, right? People don't pick up their phones as much. They don't respond to emails, et cetera, et cetera. The smart BDRs would go out and say, who knows my prospect? So Richard, for example, has introduced me over the last several years to at least a half dozen different companies. Well, that was normally Richard calling me, hey, Chad, you should talk to these guys. They seem to have a need for your product. What if the AI could flip the script, say, Richard, I see you're connected to these 18 people or these 4, and it looks like you've had a long-term relationship with them. Would you mind making an intro for me? According to a recent Salesforce.com study, you're 181 times more likely to sell a deal if you're introduced by a trusted advisor than by manually picking up the phone and calling them. So that spider chart you see in the middle would normally take a seller a year to run, because you got to look at your first connections, your seconds, and then figure out which of your contacts are connected. With AI, you click a button and in under 8 minutes, you have all the pathways defined. And you can say, oh, Elon knows the president of Zoom Video. Perfect. Elon, would you mind making an intro? Right? So accelerate and improve and enhance is what AI can do in the future.
Word of mouth on steroids, really, when it gets
No, Jill, you just stole it right from me.
That's really good. I like that. You're gonna have to trademark that one.
AI is steroids for salespeople. It really is, right? Except for it's illegal. It's totally legal.
Legal
so
steroids.
You still have to be able to hit the curveball. You still got to be able to hit, but if you take a little juice, right, you get it out faster and go farther. It is absolutely steroids for humans. The smarter you are, the better you are, the better those steroids are going to work.
Yeah, and we talked about it when we were prepping. It's about, driving a Tesla, right? Don't take your hands off the wheel. You know, the human is still part of the big puzzle, and they have to put the thinking pieces onto the overall equation, but you need all that technology behind you to get better at what you do. And I think in terms of, you know, the question of where AI is heading, it's already here, but it's about taking sometimes baby steps to getting more comfortable with it, seeing the results, you know, getting the validation points, optimizing systems, and feeling the impact of the investment and the change, so that you're building the credibility to do more and more, and bring some of these more challenging AI companies into the fold, so they can do even more for you to optimize what you're doing.
Hey, there's one question on the Q&A for an individual. Elon, this would probably be a good question for you. What's the AI solution for email that an individual can use? You know, there's been Conversica's been out for 10 years and they've been funded $90 million plus. They're, I don't know, $500 million, billion market cap, right? Probably a unicorn by now. And then there's Exceed.ai. And, you know, Conversica will charge a couple $1,000 and therefore you need to have it sponsored through the company. Elon, do you have is there an entry-level solution that can be used by an individual seller? I remember at WebEx, I used to pay cold callers to do cold calling for me, a couple $1,000s a month, funded from my own.
Zoom does it, right?
Right?
Zoom does it.
Yep.
It's a very good question. I mean, Zoom is a plug and play product and it's easy to implement. The challenge right now with where the technology is that it does require some setup and sometimes some training. But I do believe that if I look at where we were 2 years ago and where we are now, we're definitely on track to make this technology available to everybody, even an individual to at least, you know, create his own personal assistant, or to a bigger company who wants to deploy it across the board. So give us another 12 months and we'll see where we are, but at least that's our Northern Star. And that's what we're aiming to make it just like a WebEx. You can download it, click, 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 work alongside the technology for several weeks. The technology will learn from the rep how it works, how it operates, and then slowly start adding value automatically. So at least that's where we want to be. To be honest, we're not quite there yet. Some of it is technology challenges and some of it is just the maturity of the product, but I believe we're going to be there.
What about, so this is always the interesting thing, right? And for those of us who are, I think, on the panel, I just watched War Games, you know, with Matthew Broderick, right? Which was one of the first AI movies, if you think about it, at least in my opinion, it was. What about the bias, right? Like humans are the ones who are building these algorithms, right? So there's, you know, is inherent bias always going to be there? Are we going to get better at removing the bias? Because I also think that's a little bit of a challenge, and that may be bigger than the sales world, right? Like that may be a much bigger question, but I'm curious just how do all of you see that?
Man, I've been to at least a half dozen AI conferences, not sales conferences, but AI conferences. And every single one of them has a panel on ethics in AI. And the good news is that AI can take a lot of bias out. So think about a frontline manager that gets a stack of 100 resumes, to Gary's earlier point. It traditionally, a manager might look at it and go, oh, this person's name, and have immediate reaction and put it on the left pile instead of the right pile. The AI can look at it and say, no, I'm just going to look at all the words. I'm going to look at the gaps in employment. I'm going to look at the type of employment, the action words, and I'm going to tell you that this person's a 97 out of 100 and that person's a 42 out of 100. Throw the name out. I don't care about the name. I care about words on a page. I care about the answers to the questions. So to your point, who sits on the board of advisors to say, don't look at the name AI bot, you need to look at all the other inputs to remove that level of bias? I think most companies are going to have a chief ethics officer to monitor this kind of behavior and decision-making that happens across the board, HR, email, all of it, because AI will come in and it needs an oversight committee.
Anyone else want to chime in on that?
I'll just say some kind of a side note that I agree with Chad about AI will definitely introduce new type of challenges, ethical and moral and other type of challenges. Um, and the way I look at it, AI will make mistakes just like humans make mistakes. AI is is going to create some new challenges and conflict in the company. We get those questions a lot from our customers, and what my approach is very simple. If you just be very straightforward with your prospects and everybody else that this is AI, I think you'll be fine, right? People don't care who they talk to as long as their problems are solved. So while I do see why people are concerned, I believe that as humanity, we will work those issues out as they emerge.
Yeah, I do get concerned. I think we need the oversight, but I also feel I could, if that person in oversight doesn't actually have the authority to say no, and it's going to go back to the CEO or a CRO, I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, right? I'm already seeing this with diversity officers, where diversity officers are coming in to bring in a lot of diversity, but they can't actually effectively make the change. And I think that's going to be the hardest part because, and again, for not everybody, but for those of us who work with a lot of startups, it's not as much as I'd love to say everybody's ethical in the beginning, they're not, right? It's not that's going to be the biggest challenge, I think, is that person having the ability or that group to say, nope, can't do that. So another question coming in from David. Prospects are often scared of disrupting their current tech stack, right? Especially in marketing. What advice do you have to educate people that they should, right? Like you're using one marketing thing and maybe you want to swap it out for another, or you're trying to displace or rip and replace what they're currently using. As a salesperson, what advice would you give to those salespeople on how to position this, or those sales managers to position this, into change?
It's been tough. I mean, there's certain companies who have a culture of stay with what works and don't test and measure new ideas. But then there's Series A through Series C startups who have to sell or go out of business. So I think finding first your ICP is important, right? Who's the right type of customer who has the propensity to want to try new things. And then once you start to get into that early majority and early adopters, right, and crossing the chasm, then you find people, think of Jill on this call, right? She's in a big company, and yet she's here talking about AI because she's intrigued by it. So there's certain personality types that are in big companies that will go upstream and say, hey, if we don't do this thing, then we're going to get disrupted and my competition's going to eat my lunch. So I think it's finding the right companies first and then finding the right people second. If you're in a company and you are a disruptor, then, hey, work with the vendor. If you're interested in something, go to the vendor and say, hey, I'll be your champion. What can you help me with? Maybe you have a free month of service, or a lot of companies will do creative things. So if you're with a company like Jill's company, let's just think about that. If someone came to you and said, Jill, I can get this free trial for a month. We can get IT to sign off, and it can drive 20 meetings for me in a month. You'd be open to hear about it, right? If there was no cost to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think every company is different, and they have processes for doing proof of concepts and pilots, and sometimes in bigger companies that actually is like a Herculean task. But you're talking about having a good sales process, Chad, when it gets right down to it. So having doing the right discovery, understanding the problems that you can solve, and then finding the right internal champions will help you get technology in the front door. And then as the early adopter disruptor, it's about advocating and using and sharing your experience so others give it a try as well.
Yeah, for me, I've been very fortunate in that my companies have always used what I would call it the latest and greatest. And I'm with a much bigger company now, and we're still getting new stuff and all the time. But the way I like to do it with a vendor, I want to provide value to them, and not just with my money. I want to provide other value so that I can get a price that I can easily go and talk about, not free, but easily go and talk about. And in return, I'll pay it back. I'll go find the other customers for you. I'll go sell it with you. I'll do whatever it takes. But I want the relationship with the vendor, and I'll displace something if I've lost that relationship. But as long as I have that relationship, it's going to be hard to displace. So you got to find out what the pain points are. It's the same process as you would deal with any other customer. If I have pain, I'm looking for you, whatever. I'm going to ask you how I can help and how I can add value to you, and vice versa. And that's how you form great relationships. I think Chad's seen me do that before, once or twice.
Yeah, once or twice. I recall there was the winner of was it the largest lottery in the history of the country at the time that you uncovered?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And most, if not all, people in Gary's prior company made a very nice bonus as a result of uncovering that customer. And they did that because they called more people more frequently to be there first and be there often to source, because everybody chases the next big lottery winner. Not everybody, but the winners do, and the winners did in this case. So that was through technology, right?
Yes, it was. And humans, but technology first to help the humans.
Technology and humans in one.
That's it. Yep, that's all together, right? In building trust, Elon said before, trust is so important. You can't have trust unless you have rapport. It's hard to build rapport with anybody but somebody that you're making connections with. So rapport, you can't have trust without rapport. So that the humans are never displaced in that regard. So you don't have to be scared. You have to embrace, just like I said before, it's steroids for smart people.
Yeah, I was on a podcast the other day, and this woman dropped this great line about culture. And I think this applies as you're trying to find the right companies to sell to for AI. Culture is not defined by the people you work with and whether or not you like them. Culture is really defined by how easily can you get shit done, right? That is the culture of the company and the organization. And I even see Jill smiling and nodding her head like, yeah, I can understand that. So I think that's what you're looking for, right? And I think there are tools out there we've talked about where it's like, okay, go show me all these companies and which tools they're using on their website, going back to that marketing example. Well, if they're using this many tools and you can find that data, then all of a sudden, that's someone way better than anybody's got nothing on their website, right? Or they only have Google Analytics and that's it, or something like that. So that is a way to sort of look at it, and you can sort of go, all right, well, culturally, we know they're willing to take some risk or they're willing to try things. Now it'll just kind of come down to timing, right? It's not even budget, it's just timing. When are they ready to have that conversation? This is a great question. I love this one. If you picture AI as intelligence on your database that's still dealing with garbage in and garbage out, ethics is one thing, but how do you manage this intelligence when your data isn't that great or your data isn't right? So this is a great question, and I think this is probably a space where AI could be super helpful at the rep level, but at the CFO level, they might be, why can't the reps go in and change the phone number? So.
Yeah, man, I interviewed the head of product for Inside View in one of the chapters, and he blew my mind, because if you take your system of record, your CRM, and say, here's my 1,000 current customers, and you look at the different aspects of your current customers, who spends the most, what's the churn, do they land and expand, right? The AI can go in and go, whoop, and beyond a reasonable doubt, tell you that information. And then build a quadrant stack that says, here's where your customers reside. So out of 1,000, let's say 600 are on the right side, which is good. They're growing, they don't churn. But 400 are on the left side. So in my conversation with him right in the chapter, I was like, well, wait, are you going to tell a CRO to go fire 400 of his customers? That's probably not a good idea. He goes, no, not at all. I'm going to go help him find the similar ones to the 600, or better yet, the one in the upper right quadrant that grow and land and expand and don't churn. And so now I can tell you what accounts are the best accounts to go after on a proactive basis. Then you layer in things like Bombora intent data, and you say, okay, which ones of those 600 or 300 are the ones that are actually raising a hand for that type of technology? Man, the layer of sophistication. I think a rep tends to think, do I have a valid email address? Does their phone number work? And are they the right title? And that's cool when you're in the trenches. When you're at the C-level, you've got to think about market strategy and ICP and what is my market and what piece of the pie of the market. And so I think clean data goes to all of that, right?
We had a company come in to the data point where I believe that the company I was president of was flawed, and that's being nice. And the problem is that when you have flawed data, it tends to build bigger silos, and those silos that are built protect the flawed data. So I had to actually hire a company before we went to AI. So it's a real people coming in, interviewing how to use your data. And they came up with a dollar amount, a figure set that said, you're spending X amount of dollars just manipulating your own data to make it work for each division. So once we got that done and we laid it out on the table, then it was time to go and hire people, go hire the intelligence to clean the data and get rid of the stuff that we weren't using and make all that information start to come true. And frankly, data is the one way you can cut through a silo. The other way is learning, but data is the number one way to cut silos down. And to do it, you have to make sure that the data in there is not being protected and it's good. And you have to hire humans to do that in some cases.
Yeah, I remember I was on a panel once with Trish Bertuzzi, and she said the two most important things when you're building a sales org is data and dialers, right? Those two things are absolutely critical, and that was probably 5 or 6 years ago. And I think that is absolutely there, right? Better intelligence around what time to dial, day to dial, all those kinds of things, as well as, making sure you have quality data. So, well, I know we've reached the end, but I do want to give everybody a quick chance to sort of let everybody know how they can get a hold of you. I did put everybody's email address in the chat, but if someone does want to get in touch with you, LinkedIn is obvious. I think we all know that. But if you want to give out an email address, or, I always give out my cell phone number because nobody ever calls, but I'll let you guys go for it.
I'll go first. You can just go right to my LinkedIn and send me a note. It's fine with me. Most of the stuff that we do is in there. So it's easiest, so you can see what we do if you have any questions to ask through there.
Yeah, I'll be happy to connect with everybody on LinkedIn. And if you really want to get a quick meeting with me, go up to our website, sign up in our virtual SDR. We'll follow up with you, qualify you, and schedule a meeting on my calendar.
Yep, I'm on LinkedIn as well, and that would be the best way. And I know Richard put our email addresses in the chat, so either way works for me.
And as a Exceed partner, you too can come to my website, scalex.ai, click on the virtual assistant in the bottom. Try to, here's my challenge, is try to stump the bot and ask some far out questions just to see, because then we can go back upstream to Elon and provide the feedback.
Chad, I'm all for it, man. I'm going to go stump the bot in just a moment. Awesome, everybody. Thank you so much. And by the way, big shout out for this event, for Momentum. And we just really, really appreciate Steve Richard and what they're doing to really help us over at Exec Vision. So please, when you get a chance, thank them as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.